Motorcycles are dangerous, kids. Yo, what's up, guys? So when you start riding motorcycles, there's always these people that say, it's not a matter if you go down, it's a matter of when. And I never really took that seriously. Even though I've known a few guys that crashed, even a couple that have died. I never really paid any mind to it. That wasn't until the day it happened to me. Now, I love motorcycles. And anybody who rides will tell you that it's kind of a therapy. Whenever you're in a bad mood, you jump on the bike and you go for a ride. You put your helmet on, you block out the world. It's just you and the road. I rode in the rain, I rode in the snow, I rode whenever. In fact, the day of the accident was December and there was snow on the ground. Seems kind of crazy, but motorcyclists will understand. Now I remember that day getting ready to go on the ride and I was letting the engine warm up on the bike. I remember trying to decide if I should wear my helmet or not. To be honest with you, I always didn't wear it. It seems kind of stupid, but that day was so cold. I remember as I'm debating it, a freezing cold gust of wind hit me in the face. And I said, let me put the helmet on to block the wind. Thinking back on it now, it's honestly what saved my life. So I take off on this ride and it's a great ride. I'm about 20 minutes in and I'm on Interstate 95 in Philadelphia. No traffic, midday, probably 1 o'clock. I notice I'm doing about 70 and the bike starts having issues. It would turn off, literally turn off. All the gauges, the electronics would just go blank and then come back on. I'm doing 70 miles an hour on the highway, so it's got me a little alarmed. So I decide that I need to get off the highway at this point. The bike seemed dangerous. So the next exit ramp, I line up and head for it. Now as I'm approaching the exit ramp, the issue happens again. The bike turns off. And this basically puts a motorcycle in neutral. You're coasting. Now I'm looking down at the gauges and I'm trying to diagnose what the issue could be. It's a brand new bike and I don't understand what's happening. Come to find out, about a year later, Suzuki would end up recalling all these motorcycles, my Suzuki GXR 1000, for a faulty sensor that in the ignition that caused the bike to do this. I'm looking down at the gauges and I notice the RPMs have gone to 0, meaning that the engine is completely off, getting no power, and I'm coasting still. As I'm trying to figure this out, the bike turns back on and the RPMs jump from 0 to 7,000, and this causes the bike to lunge forward and almost do a wheelie. Kind of lose control of the bike starts a wobble, and I'm on the off-ramp. The concrete wall, called a Jersey wall, you've seen them on highways about waist high, is literally a second away. And in my mind, the only thing I could think to do, because you know you're going to crash, even in that split second, you know. The only thing I could decide to do was jump off the bike. When you're doing that kind of speed though, you don't come off the bike. I barely made it inches off the bike, but it made a world of difference. I slammed into the wall. All I remember is flying through the air and losing consciousness. Next thing I know, I wake up and there's people standing over me. I'm laying in the snow, bleeding everywhere. My helmet, which I was wearing, is somewhere, and I can't feel my legs. So the first person I notice is a lady standing over me, a Muslim lady in fact. She's wearing the hijab, and she's going like this, and she's on the phone with 911, trying to call for help. So to the right of me, I look and I notice there's a Caucasian lady, and she has a stethoscope around her neck. I later found out she was a nurse on the way to work at one of the local hospitals. And she's leaning over me, and I became fixated on this cross that's hanging from her neck, just dangling inches above my head. And she's trying to calm me down. About that time I notice there's a man behind me, and he's cradling my neck with his knees, and he's got a really nice suit on, and same thing, he's telling me to calm down, everything's gonna be okay, help's on the way. And I remember looking at him and for some reason making a joke about his suit. I said, I'm getting blood all over your suit, I'm sorry. And he said, I don't care about the suit, all I care about is that you're all right. And to this day I still think about that. I still think about him saying that and how selfless it was. To the right of me, I noticed yelling, and what had happened was there's a it was a homeless man. He was asking for change on the side of the road when he heard the crash. Come to find out, he was the first one that came to my aid. He had really disheveled clothes. I think he was missing a shoe. He's yelling at cars as they pass to stop taking pictures and get the heck out of the way. I remember laughing to myself at the time because this guy was like my hero. He cared more about my dignity and the perception of what I must look like on the side of the road, and these people spectating at my misery. And I can only imagine the lifestyle he lives where that is probably an issue to him, his dignity and the way people look at him. I never forgot how selfless he was to be concerned for that. As we waited for the ambulance to show up, I remember the pain, just incredible amount of pain. The nurse had told me that she identified a bone protruding from my side, and she had come find out that I shattered my hip. When I hit the wall, that 2 second of lifting off the bike caused me to impact the wall on my hip bone rather than on my stomach where my internal organs lie. Later on, recovering at the hospital, I come to learn that had I not lifted off the bike, had I remained seated, I would have been paralyzed. It would have snapped my spine like a toothpick. But because I was able to take the shock into the hip bone, I shattered my hip. But I'm walking. So now the firefighters have finally arrived and they're trying to load me onto this stretcher. And I remember every time they touched me, the intense searing pain where you're shaking and you want to pass out. That's how bad it is. I remember at this point looking over at the ambulance, and leaning against the ambulance were the 4 people that were helping me. Now, this was probably, and I'm going to say this, I'm not a religious person, but this was probably the most religious experience of my life. Almost like time stood still. I'm looking at these 4 people. We have a Muslim lady standing next to a Caucasian Catholic lady, standing next to a seemed like a wealthy, respectful, successful man, standing next to a homeless beggar. And it seemed like if God had picked 4 of the most diverse people to help me, those were the people. All walks of life, all genders, all races, all social status. It didn't matter. At that moment, people that probably would have never spoke to each other on any other day came together to help a stranger, to help me. And that moment was frozen in my memory to this day. So finally they get me into the ambulance and we start driving. And I remember the paramedic being concerned for the amount of blood I lost. She kept asking me questions. What's today's date? What's your name? Who's the President of the United States? What month is it? And I couldn't remember anything. I knew this was a bad sign. You know when you can't remember your own name that something's wrong. And then all of a sudden, I remember I could feel no pain. In fact, it felt soothing. I felt relaxed. I felt comfortable. And let's remember that I was laying in the snow this whole time and I was freezing. The cold went away and I panicked. I kept telling myself, Brian, this is what people describe when they die. This is it. You're dying. You should be in pain. You should be freezing. You feel too comfortable. I feel too at peace. I wanted to go to sleep. And those thoughts made me freak out. I begged the ambulance driver to keep me awake, to drive faster. I started screaming. She's trying to hold me down. It's making the pain come back. And as this is happening, everything goes dark. I lose consciousness. And I remember slowly, as almost like you're going to sleep, that moment of this is it. I remember my last thought being, it's the end, being scared. I remember feeling fear. About an hour later, I woke up in the emergency room. Bunch of doctors standing over me. Panicked looks on their face. But I remember my first thought, almost as if no time had skipped. I remember feeling grateful that I wasn't dead. I remember feeling that I had just dodged death. That my last thoughts would have been, I don't want to die. And just appreciating being here. In a moment of realizing you're not dead, it was one of the most significant moments of my life. Doctors finally tell me that I have a shattered hip, more specifically something called a acetabular. Your leg sits in a socket. My femur bone went through it. To relieve the pain, they have to pull the femur away. Now, this procedure is called a traction pin. They literally took a drill, I'm laying there watching it, and pushed it through my knee and stuck a pin through it. This pin was connected to a pulley system that then hangs over a rail that's about 4 feet over your bed. The tension keeps your legs separated from your bone socket at all times, so there's no pain. It was not a fun experience. They reel me down to x-rays, MRIs, get the whole scoop. All in all, I had shattered my hip. If you grab your hip right now, you feel that bone, it's called the iliac crest. I shattered mine in half. I broke my butt bone, it's called the tuberosity. All the pelvic, pubic area bones. My face, I shattered my nose, my eye socket, my jaw, and I spent 9 days in the hospital. 2 surgeries. I put 4 titanium plates inside my hip, and it took me 7 months to walk again. I was in a wheelchair for 7 months. It was right around Christmas, and it was the loneliest period of my life. You really find out who your friends are when you're in a bad spot. I thought I was Mr. Popular, and I was laying in a bed with a wheelchair in a 1,200 square foot room, and no one came to visit me. No one came to see if I was alright. And as Christmas grew on, the snow accumulated by the window, and I spent my first Christmas alone. It was a dark period in my life. I can't take this wheelchair anymore. Out of that whole time, no one came to visit, except one girl. Actually, she's a girl who should have hated me. Probably a year before that accident, we used to hook up, and I wasn't so nice to her. But out of all the people in my life, this is the person that came around. She worked at a restaurant, and every night she would get one employee meal, but she would bring it to me instead of eating it herself. And she would come for 15 minutes, clean up, make sure I ate, and then go home. And just that little act of kindness meant the world of difference to me. Just by doing that, she set herself apart from every other person in my life. This was a person who genuinely cared about me, and we only grew closer. Today, she's my wife. This is my wife, Samantha. We now have 2 boys together, and we've been married for 3 years. The point of this story is to tell people that bad things happen to all of us. We all go through stuff. We all have a story. I'm no different. It's the way we come out of it. I could have chose to be angry and let that turn me into a mean, mad person, blaming the world. But it didn't. I saw the positive. If this never happened, I wouldn't have a wife, I wouldn't have kids. I'd probably still be riding a motorcycle. And who knows, maybe I'd be a statistic. Everything does happen for a reason, and life is about events that teach us. Become the phoenix, rise from the ashes, turn tragedy into triumph. Maybe you're having trouble coping with something or adjusting from something that's happened to you. Well, get the positive. Think about what your life can be. Because it does get better, I swear. Guys, I know this was a long video. I just tried to remember everything from memory. I want to thank you for sticking it out to the end. Like and subscribe. Have a good day. Thank you.